I'm Johnny, and here today on Bork we're going to be talking about pork. We're talking about animal products such as beef, chicken, eggs, milk, because we're talking about the environmental impacts of meat and animal products and going vegan. So what is vegan? So if you're a vegan, you don't eat any animal products. So traditionally, I think the kind of typical vegan that you might imagine is a bit of a hippie. There's not that many of them, and they're the awkward person to have around your house because you're going to have to cook some kind of quinoa salad or something like that. I don't know what you'd have, but you don't want just a tin of baked beans to chug down, do you? You want to have a chicken Kiev or something equally classy. So those vegans that we're thinking of there, I think traditionally they've been quite focused on the ethical side of things. They're kind of standing outside McDonald's when you leave, with photos and videos of a cow hanging upside down with its throat cut, and they're trying to make you feel guilty about eating meat because animals are so lovely and we don't want to kill them and cut their heads off for food. So I think this is actually changing now quite a lot because veganism is becoming a much more mainstream option that you see around the place every day. And I think this is because people do still care about the animal ethics side of things and killing the animals, but there's a lot more factors that are actually coming into play now. So you've got the environmental factors. We hear all the time now about how, even the world's biggest dairy and meat companies, actually some of their emissions exceed oil companies, their emissions. So I think companies like Shell and BP actually have lower emissions than many of these meat and dairy companies, which is quite unbelievable. So that's pushing a lot of people to adopt the kind of low carbon diet because we're hearing more and more about climate change every day. Health is obviously a big factor to a lot of people nowadays when it comes to not eating meat. Lots of people believe that eating meats like beef, like lots of red meat, can cause obesity and heart disease and cancer. The jury's out on that one, but you certainly hear that a lot. There's less obvious reasons why you might want to drop the meat and go vegan. So our editor, he actually suffers from rheumatoid arthritis, but he's started going on a vegan diet. I'm not sure how strict he's actually been with that at the moment.
Vaguely strict.
But he was going on this vegan diet and he said that his health was actually improving in terms of his joints and muscles. They felt much less stiff and painful, and that's just from cutting out the meat. So all of those things are reasons why veganism is actually becoming more popular, and there are lots of statistics to actually back me up on this one. So the Vegan Society said between 2014 and 2018 the amount of vegans actually quadrupled. They say that vegans now make up around 1% of the population. I would strongly disagree with that in the sense that I think there's way more vegans out there than 1%. I think in Muswell Hill at least, which is quite an affluent area where everyone's doing yoga and shopping in organic places, all these people are actually, I'd say about 80% of them were saying that they've either gone vegan, gone vegetarian, or made like a real concerted effort to cut down on their meat product consumption in some way. Soon we might see a day where you can go into McDonald's or Burger King or KFC even, and go for vegan options there, because that sounds kind of unbelievable. Vegan options, we associate those places with chicken nuggets, burgers, but there's a couple places in London where I've gone actually recently because we've got a couple of vegans working with us here, and they encouraged me to go to these places in Camden and other trendy areas of London where you can actually get, it's essentially like fried chicken, but it's the vegan option. So it's made out of seitan. I don't really know what seitan consists of, but it's some kind of organic, fungi, soy, corn style mix-up ingredient there. But they basically can make pretty convincing fried chicken out of it. So I think soon enough we could see all fast food places everywhere offering vegan options. And to be honest, at that stage there's not really an excuse anymore to be eating animals, in my opinion. And that's coming from a meat eater. I think the thing that holds a lot of people back is you go out with your mates and you might get drunk or something and have a kebab. If the vegan option isn't there, you're probably going to end up still having the kebab or the burger or whatever you want. Even in Sainsbury's now, you can basically get like beef mince alternatives or like chicken shawarma alternatives. And if that was in the kebab shop, people would become vegans and they would fall into the habit where it wouldn't actually affect their day-to-day life. They could go out, know that they're going to be able to find a suitable vegan option that's not too expensive, tastes quite nice, doesn't kill an animal. Obviously the costs have to come down too, but to be honest, I quite often eat the meat alternative options anyway, mainly because I don't like the idea of animals being mercilessly slaughtered for my breakfast. And they're as nice, but sometimes they're slightly more expensive. That's all right for me. I'm a nice middle-class boy from Surrey. But some people don't have that option where, the extra 50p on some vegetarian cocktail sausages and some normal cocktail sausages. that's going to make quite a big difference. So I think that's something that needs to be sorted out. To be honest, I think vegetarian options should actually be cheaper than meat options where it's possible. That's not always possible if you're having some vegetarian meal that is made up of 20 avocados or something. So that is a problem, I think, where lots of restaurants might charge you, I don't know, 20 quid for a steak. You know, you go there with all your friends, you're tempted to become vegetarian, you're trying to cut down on your meat consumption, you're not all the way there yet, and then you see on the menu, oh, the vegetarian option is 1 quid less than this Japanese steak. It's obviously taken a lot more money and emissions and resources to grow that steak compared to your fillet of mung bean salad or whatever you're having over there. The economics might discourage you in lots of cases because you're not going to pick that option. If you're used to having the steak and it costs the same price as the vegetarian one, you're not going to pick the greener option. Usually meat options are actually far more expensive to produce anyway. There's, you know, you've got to look after a cattle for its whole lifetime before slaughtering it, feed it every day. So it's using up so much more resources and so much more money to create one steak compared to just a salad, or, you know, it doesn't have to be a salad. There's much more interesting vegan meals, but they require much less resources and they should actually be cheaper. So I think that's very important, just to reflect the actual market costs of it. And also to encourage people to make that shift. So lots of companies are actually coming out with this stuff already. You've got the Greggs vegan sausage roll, which has taken the pastry breakfast market by storm, thanks in part to Piers Morgan, who helped do the PR for them on Twitter.
Because they've got the same seasoning.
God!
I like them. They've got nice crisp pastry.
Yeah.
The vegetarian sausage is nicely flavoured.
Good job there, Piers. So in KFC even, they're actively pursuing seitan options, which is a chicken alternative. I've had it, it's actually quite nice and it's vaguely comparable to normal chicken. But I'm sure they're improving that day by day. Soon you could be going and getting your boneless banquet box, cruelty-free there and meat-free, emissions-free. So I actually used to be a vegetarian. I was a vegetarian for 9 years, starting when I was 4. And that started because I saw a turkey at Christmas time hanging upside down in the butcher's window. And that was the moment that it clicked for me that these delicious slices of stuff you have on your Christmas dinner actually came from an animal. That was a traumatizing moment, and my mum didn't enjoy it much either. But yeah, basically I got home and said to my mum, I want to go vegetarian. Oh, I didn't say that because I was 4, but I said,
I don't want to eat the bird hanging in the window anymore. That's disgusting, and what a poor bird.
So my mum, being my mum, was wonderful, and she said, okay, I'll cook 2 dinners for the next 18 years, which is a decision I'm sure she came to regret pretty quickly. So she allowed me to do that, to cut meat out of my diet when I made the realization of where it came from. But I was 13 years old one day and at school, and I smelt some bacon coming up from the cafeteria, and I kind of thought, oh, why don't I eat that? That smells nice. So, you know, I went home, ate some bacon, had some marshmallows, full fat gelatin based marshmallows, best day of my life. Had the shits all evening. So that was my brief journey with vegetarian and veganism. But actually at the moment I've been swayed again. So my mum and I were watching, my mum's playing an important part in this veganism journey. But we were watching television and it came up with this recap of, Gordon Ramsay he'd raised some pigs and given them names, and it was really cute and everything. And then he took them to a slaughterhouse and cut their throats. And my mum, but she was basically saying, oh my God, this is horrific. Does this happen? Why did he do that in such a cruel way? And I said, no, that is how most animals are killed. And she said, we should go vegetarian. So I said, I bet you can't go vegetarian, Mum, just for a month. And she said, okay, fine. So we've got a bet on at the moment. She's already lost the bet, but I'm going to carry it through for the rest of the month. So I think the environmental side is very important because we hear so much about cars. Drive your cars less, turn the lights off when you leave the house, don't leave your TV on standby all the time. But actually most of those things are overshadowed by the amount of emissions that is just in our lunch every day. That seems obvious, we're putting it into our bodies. Surely you should be most aware of where that comes from. But I think there's a massive disconnect between, you go to the supermarket and you buy a packet of beef mince. And it's quite easy just to fall into the habit of being like that. The product is beef mince, but really the product is this animal that's they've had to grow it over a really long period of time. It's soaked up so many resources that could just be used to feed people instead, that hopefully you wouldn't slaughter at the end of the process. So instead, you have to pick up, I think, that meat, and whenever you're eating something, you don't necessarily have to phase meat out completely, because I think that's a lot to ask for a lot of people. But you just have to be aware of what you're putting in your body, the ethical implications and the environmental implications, because it's pointless doing your recycling every day and, you know, recycling your milkshake bottle once a week as if that's going to save the planet. But then, you know, you're just chowing down on all these cattle that they're cutting down half of the Amazon to make room for. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect there between meat consumption and other things that we hear about as being very environmentally intensive. Yeah, I don't want to act too preachy because I love a salt beef bagel as much as the next person. That's my Friday lunchtime treat normally. So I would like a way to be able to continue having that, but while not damaging the planet and torturing these creatures so much. And there could be hope on the horizon, actually. So there's a thing called, it's got lots of names because it hasn't been invented yet, so they're still coming up with a catchy title. I read quite a lot about it a couple of years ago, and it was called in vitro meat back then. I think now they've gone for the slightly catchier lab-grown meat title, but it is what it is what it says on the tin. It's just meat that's grown in labs. So big slabs of animal protein, essentially, rather than fields full of cattle. You'd get a warehouse full of massive petri dishes growing cell cultures and so on, which would basically mean, if it can be achieved on a cost-effective scale, that we could continue our meat consumption and it would be exactly the same. So it wouldn't be an alternative. It would be just like having a steak or a piece of chicken. You'd take the animal cells and you'd grow them, but nothing needs to die, nothing needs to be fed, nothing needs to be looked after, kept warm, trimmed, sheared, you know, anything like that. So I think that's a really good option. I can't really see any reason why someone would object to that, because, you know, it's saving the energy, saving the planet, saving the animals. So I think those are the three main reasons why vegans might decide to actually cut out meat from their diet. So this could be the holy grail if we can actually get the prices down. Yeah, so this technology, essentially all it comes down to is just growing proteins in a lab. So that's not limited to just meat because agriculture is also a massive source of emissions. So if we're growing all these animal proteins in the lab, we could next to them be growing the plant proteins. So you could be growing your beef over here in one lab, and then you could have your carrots over here growing in one big sheet of carrots. So it's quite a weird idea to get our head around, but it could be a much more efficient way to do things in the future. It's just come into my head, but technically you could even grow human meat in the lab, so that would be quite interesting. I could grow a Johnny meat product in my laboratory, and I could have my mates round for a barbecue and offer them up Johnny's rump steak with some peppercorn sauce on the barbecue. So that would be interesting. I'm sure they would enjoy tucking into that one, wouldn't you, lads? It would be cruelty-free, emissions-free, and I'm sure it would be delicious. Okay, I hope you enjoyed my little rant there. Hopefully it will have had some effect on you, whether that's to eat more meat or less meat, I don't really care. But let me know in the comments, and please share the video on Twitter, Facebook, whatever kind of social media you use. So yeah, I'll see you next time. I'm Johnny, and you've been Borked.